let's unpack this. Today, we are deep diving into, well, the machine behind annual horror franchises. We're using the 2012 film Paranormal Activity 4 as our microscope here. The real question isn't just, was the movie scary? It's more, how does a super successful film series keep making so much money year after year, even when, let's be honest, most critics agree the quality is, well, dropping?
Right, and what's fascinating is how the sources immediately frame this. We're not really analyzing art in the traditional sense. It's more like a seasonal product cycle. Our mission today really is to get under the hood of the financial logic, the sort of logistical reasons why these October releases feel almost inevitable. The review we're looking at gets this perfectly. It treats PA4 as the expected output of a formula so profitable that quality kind of becomes secondary.
Yeah, profitability over pretty much everything else. And just to highlight how big a deal this franchise was for horror, it didn't just pop up randomly, it slid right into a specific slot. The Paranormal Activity series basically inherited that guaranteed Halloween horror event title directly from the Saw films, after Saw finally called it a day after, 7 movies?
Mostly continuous releases, yeah. When Saw stepped out, PA stepped right in. It shows there's this predictable hunger for a seasonal scare, and studios, well, they exploit that like clockwork.
Okay, so let's get straight to the money then, because that's where the aha moment really is, isn't it?
Absolutely. We need to talk about the scale of the financial success here because it's genuinely stunning. The huge appeal of Paranormal Activity for a studio comes down to one simple thing.
Yeah.
How unbelievably cheap these movies are to make.
Okay, give us the numbers. This is where the economics of fear really hits home.
So let's look at the series leading up to PA4. The total combined budget for all the films up to that point was only $8,015,000 US dollars.
Wait, hang on. $8 million total for the whole series. How does that even... these are major studio releases we're talking about. Marketing, distribution.
And that is the genius, if you want to call it that, of the found footage model. They are essentially printing money because the overhead, almost non-existent.
Yeah.
Think about where Hollywood usually spends the big bucks. Huge star salaries, elaborate CGI, massive sets, location shoots.
Right.
None of that applies here. $8 million. That covers, minimally paid non-union actors, maybe renting a house or two pretty cheaply, a few cameras, some basic post-production effects. The whole point of found footage means bad lighting and shaky cam are features, not bugs.
Okay, right. It's structurally cheap by design. So contrast that tiny $8 million investment, which, probably wouldn't even cover the catering on a Marvel set, with what they actually made back.
The combined box office earnings, a massive $576,571,650 US dollars.
Wow.
The source is dead on when it just flatly says, not a bad investment. When your profit margins are consistently over 5,000%, well, the logic for making another one every year is kind of hard to argue with, even if the creative well is clearly running dry.
But surely, even a guaranteed moneymaker hits a point of diminishing returns eventually. Was there any sign the audience was maybe getting a bit tired of the same old tricks? Because we have to bring in that critical perspective now. Money talks, but it doesn't guarantee respect, does it? Our source points to the Resident Evil movies as the classic example here.
Oh, yeah?
Hugely successful financially, yeah. But critics pretty much savaged every single one after the first. The studio got incredibly rich, but the brand itself lost almost all creative credibility.
Absolutely. And if you map that onto the PA franchise, look, the critical enthusiasm was already waning well before Paranormal Activity 4 even arrived, the first Paranormal Activity. People generally saw it as a pretty smart, decent addition to the whole found footage thing. It was tight, effective.
It proved the concept could work, definitely.
Exactly. But then came Paranormal Activity 2. Critics thought it was maybe a bit silly, relied more heavily on jump scares, but okay, they admitted it still delivered some effective, creepy moments. By the time the prequel, Paranormal Activity 3, came out, the source describes the plot as borderline ridiculous and very familiar. The series was already feeling thin creatively.
And yet, PA3 alone still made a massive $200 million profit. So that's the real bind for the filmmakers, isn't it? How do you justify busting a gut to invent a genuinely new story when your last effort, which everyone agreed was kind of tired, still banked $200 million?
The answer seems to be you don't try that hard.
Right.
Which is exactly why PA4 felt completely, utterly inevitable. The machine just demands its annual product. You don't just stop a profit engine running at those kinds of margins.
Exactly. So, okay, here we are. It's 2012. The next installment lands just in time for Halloween again. Let's maybe walk the listener through the plot of PA4, but maybe connect how the plot itself served that cheap filmmaking need.
Okay. So the film picks up 5 years after the events where, the possessed Katie vanished with her baby nephew, Hunter. The focus shifts to a new family. Teenage daughter Alex is our main character. And then this strange single mother and her young son, Robbie, move in next door.
And Robbie is immediately flagged as the source of the weirdness, right? He's set up as just unnerving, creepy. The
Hmm.
source even says he's channeling the children from the village of the dam.
Yeah, classic creepy kid trope.
Textbook horror setup, using the quiet, unsettling child for instant dread. And then, when Robbie's mom gets sick unexpectedly, he ends up moving in with Alex's family and forms this weird bond with the youngest kid, Wyatt.
Right. And now the key creative decision, which conveniently is also a super cheap logistical solution, is how they monitor everything. Alex and her boyfriend Ben figure the best way to watch Robbie and Wyatt is to hack into and set up all the laptop webcams around the house.
Yeah.
Apparently, every single room has a laptop just sitting there.
Huh. That is interesting. Moving from the fixed security cameras of the earlier films, which already felt like a stretch sometimes, to laptops everywhere, it's like an attempt to modernize the found footage idea, maybe. But it's still doing the same basic thing, giving the directors cheap, static shots. Minimal crew, minimal camera movement needed.
And this is where the execution really comes under fire in the review. It's pretty brutal. Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman are directing again, and just like the previous ones, the film apparently takes a really long time to get going. The structure gets criticized right away.
And it's the kind of scares that suffer, too, right? That classic PA problem of mixing up cheap jump scares with actual suspense.
Precisely. The first act is apparently just loaded with fake scares.
Yeah.
Things designed purely for a quick shock, but with zero substance behind them. You know the type? The cat suddenly jumps in front of the camera, or characters just jumping out at each other for laughs.
Yeah.
The review argues this just waters down the whole experience.
Yeah.
If the audience is constantly being tricked into jumping at nothing, they stop trusting the film. So when real tension should be building, it doesn't land.
That's just bad pacing, basically. You're making the audience wait and watch all this mundane footage, building patience, and then you completely blow it by trying to, cram a conclusion into the last 5 minutes.
The source doesn't pull any punches there. The final verdict on the film's execution, it turned out to be little more than a near 90-minute YouTube scare video.
Ouch. That's damning. It's just offering that lowest common denominator found footage, experience the jump scare compilation, but charging you full cinema prices.
Exactly. And that leads us straight into the whole idea of creative bankruptcy, the sequel machine, just churning things out. The film gets slammed for basically bringing nothing new to the table. The source says flat out there's nothing to surprise or intrigue in terms of the plot. Just follow the formula.
And not only did they not add anything, but they actually messed with the existing story. There's mention of a gaping plot hole caused by one of the reveals, especially if you remember the lore from the earlier films.
Yeah, which raises that question we touched on. Did the filmmakers even care about the franchise's own backstory at this point? Or were they just focused on hitting the release date?
It sounds like the main goal was just making sure people jumped a few times, right? Regardless of whether the story held together, the review suggests the filmmakers didn't seem to even care about a plot, just figuring, hey, a few decent scares, the audience goes home happy enough. They seem to have totally abandoned trying to explain or expand the demon backstory, which, at least the prequels tried to do, even if it got messy.
And maybe the clearest sign the creative team was running on fumes. The constant, really obvious homages. The film is apparently packed with nods to horror classics. The Omen, The Exorcist, The Shining. The reviewer reads this as the directors basically admitting they are running out of their own ideas and just borrowing heavily.
So instead of creating new, subtle, found footage scares, they just point outwards like, make Robbie act like Damien from The Omen.
Yeah, that does feel like throwing in the towel creatively.
It really does. And it's made worse by relying on visual tricks that were already getting old. Those overused night vision scenes where you're just staring at a grainy green image waiting for something, anything, to move. They'd lost their punch long before this film. And the main scare tactic with, people being killed by the Invisible Man, the review says it was just tiresome and ineffective by PA4. Apparently, it was done with zero effect and almost laughably predictable by then.
It's funny. Despite this whole laundry list of creative failures, the source did find one bright spot, one thing that actually worked.
Oh.
The performance. Brady Allen, the kid playing Robbie, the creepy neighbor boy, his stoic performance apparently really stood out. Ah, okay. That happens sometimes in franchises that are, let's say, struggling. A cast member manages to elevate the material a bit, despite everything else. So Alan managed to create that genuinely uncomfortable feeling in the first couple of acts, just by being unsettlingly quiet and present. That probably carried a lot of the film when the plot wasn't delivering, gave the audience something creepy to latch onto.
But that atmosphere, however good, wasn't enough to rescue the whole thing in the end.
No. The conclusion is pretty clear. The film started out okay, maybe had some potential, but was unfortunately let down by a horrendous third act, which overshadows the whole film. It just collapses when the cheap effects and the rushed, nonsensical ending kick in.
So what's the big takeaway here for you listening? We started with this financial machine that guarantees an annual movie, and we ended up with a movie that critics largely panned for being unoriginal and, frankly, lazy. The tension is crystal clear. Why bother trying harder creatively when the money rolls in anyway?
And the most important piece of that puzzle, the one that's often overlooked, the audience. The source notes that despite the critical drubbing, the audience, for the most part, didn't appear to mind. And that's crucial. Why did they keep coming back?
Was it just brand loyalty? Or maybe going to see the new PA movie became a kind of Halloween ritual, a social thing. Or maybe the bar for found footage was just low enough that people weren't expecting high art, just an excuse to scream with friends.
Probably all of the above. These movies weren't really sold on their quality anymore, were they? They were sold on tradition, on being there every October. They were cheap, reliable social events. The studio knows that spending, say, $10 million more on a brilliant script probably won't make that much more money than spending $1 million on a repetitive one, especially when the brand is that strong. That final line in the review, "See you same time next year," it just nails it. The profit guarantees the cycle continues, whether the story has anything left to say or not.
It's that fundamental tension, isn't it? Guaranteed massive profit versus dwindling creative effort. That really defines this whole era of low-budget, high-return horror. We saw the scale over $500 million made from an initial investment of just $8 million. Achieving that kind of success requires absolutely zero artistic risk.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to chew on, drawing directly from this whole analysis. If a studio can make hundreds of millions from a film that barely bothers with a new plot, relies on cheap fake-out scares, and delivers a rushed, illogical ending, well, does that kind of guaranteed financial success ultimately strangle the very creativity that launched the genre in the first place? Is profitability the final unbeatable demon that these found footage films are really wrestling with? Think about that trade-off, profit versus relevance, next time you see a sequel number hitting 4, 5, or 6.